Ronnie Tillman, my mailman for 15 years, pulled his truck alongside my service van and leaned out the window. "Saw your daughter Kristen yesterday," he said. "Over at those fancy condos on Stonebriar. Signed for some designer package." My hands froze on the invoice. "Kristen died 3 years ago in Mexico. Car accident. Body cremated. Ashes scattered. I've been sending her husband Derek $750 every month since to help raise her orphaned children." My throat tightened. "You sure it was her? Honey blonde hair, green eyes," Ronnie said. "Looked real good, Lloyd." If this story hooks you, hit subscribe and tell me your country in the comments. It means the world to me. My name is Lloyd Wescott. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent 32 years keeping people comfortable in their homes. That sounds straightforward. It never was. I started in 1990 as a 22-year-old apprentice, working for a man named Earl Briggs who ran a 3-truck operation out of Mesquite. Earl wore the same Carhartt jacket every day for 11 years. "People let you into their homes at their most vulnerable," he told me once. Middle of August, their AC goes out, they've got a baby crying and a mother-in-law visiting. You show up, you fix it right, you charge fair. That's the whole business. I learned compressors and condensers, sure, but I learned the truth of it, how to look a homeowner in the eye and tell them what their system needed. Not what would make me the most money. What would actually solve their problem. Earl retired in 2001. I bought his client list for $8,000, every dollar I'd saved over 7 years, and renamed the company Wescott Comfort Solutions. Started with one used van and a toolbox my father gave me before he passed. By 2010, I had contracts with 3 nursing homes across Collin County. Good people running those facilities. They needed someone who'd answer the phone at 2 a.m. when their heating failed and 83 elderly residents were shivering. I was that someone. 2 churches came next. First Baptist of Garland, where I'd been a member since childhood. Grace Methodist over in Richardson, where the facilities manager was a Marine like my uncle. They trusted me because I showed up when I said I would, charged what I quoted, and never cut corners on parts. The residential clients accumulated slowly. 200 families who requested me by name. Mrs. Patterson on Buckingham Road, whose husband died in 2008 and who still made me sweet tea every service call. The Nwins on Jupiter, whose 3 boys I watched grow from toddlers to college students. The Hendersons, the Marshalls, the family on Centerville whose name I could never quite pronounce, but whose thermostat I'd replaced 4 times because their cat kept knocking it off the wall. I knew their systems better than they did. I knew which houses had ductwork from the 70s, that needed insulation, which had filters that clogged every 6 weeks instead of 12, which had compressors that would last another decade, and which were running on borrowed time. 32 years of honest work. That's what I built. I met Doris in 1987, 3 years before I started apprenticing. She was a librarian at Lyles Middle School, organizing a book drive at First Baptist when I walked in to help move boxes. She had dark hair that fell past her shoulders and a way of looking at you that made you want to tell her things you'd never said aloud. We married at 25, a small ceremony in the same church where I'd been baptized. Her parents drove down from Oklahoma. My mother wore the dress she'd saved for a decade. Earl Briggs served as my best man because my father was already gone by then, heart attack at 52 while loading his truck for a job site. Doris understood the work. She understood why I came home smelling like refrigerant, why my knuckles stayed scraped, why I disappeared on Christmas Eve to fix a furnace for a family with 4 kids. One night, I came home at midnight after a nursing home emergency, expecting questions about where I'd been. She just handed me a plate she'd kept warm in the oven and said, "Mrs. Chen called to thank you." Said her mother stopped shivering by 10. She packed my lunches every morning for 28 years. turkey on wheat, an apple, a thermos of coffee, sometimes a note that said nothing more than, "Come home safe." Kristen was born 3 years after we married. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a full head of hair that Doris said came from her side. I held my daughter in the delivery room at 3:47 a.m., and I made a promise I've never spoken aloud I would give her stability. The kind I never had growing up with a father who died too young and a mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. I took double shifts. Weekends, holidays, whatever came. When Kristen wanted dance lessons at 8, I picked up a commercial maintenance contract that paid for 2 years of classes. When she needed braces at 12, I added evening calls to my schedule for 6 months straight. Doris worried I worked too much. She told me once, sitting at the kitchen table after Kristen went to bed, that she'd rather have me home than have extra money. I nodded like I understood, but I kept working. That's what providers do. For our 20th anniversary, Doris gave me a belt. Hand-tooled leather she'd ordered from a craftsman in San Antonio. My initials on a brass buckle, W. She watched me open the box, her hands clasped in her lap, and said, "So you remember who you are, even when you're crawling through some stranger's attic." I've worn it every day since. The leather has molded to my waist. The brass has darkened with years of my hands touching it. When the world gets too heavy, I reach for that buckle and feel her with me. My garage workshop became my sanctuary after Kristen left for college. 60 vintage thermostats mounted on pegboard along the back wall. Honeywells, Robert Shaw's, White Rogers units from the 50s and 60s. I'd find them at estate sales, in boxes of junk at flea markets, sometimes in the trash bins behind supply houses where younger techs threw out equipment they considered obsolete. I'd spend Sunday afternoons at my workbench with a magnifying glass and dental picks, cleaning mercury contacts, replacing worn gaskets, testing the bimetallic coils that made these old devices work. The smell of old brass and machine oil. No circuit boards, no programming, just physics, a coil of metal that expands when it gets warm and contracts when it cools. Simple, honest, true. The 1953 Honeywell Round is my favorite. '87 model, the one that became iconic in American homes. I restored it the week before everything fell apart, polishing the brass housing until it gleamed, adjusting the temperature dial until it clicked with precision at every degree mark. When I finished, I held it in my hands. Peace. That was the last peaceful thing I felt for 3 years. The call came on a Tuesday evening, March 15, 22. I was in my workshop, cleaning a 1967 Honeywell that had arrived in a box of donated items from a church rummage sale. My phone rang, and my son-in-law Derek's name appeared on the screen. His voice sounded wrong. Too high, too tight. Howers. Lloyd. I could hear him breathing, traffic sounds behind him, nothing else. Hast. Lloyd, buddy, I don't know how to say this. I set down the thermostat. What happened? There was an accident. In Mexico. Kristen was driving on the coast highway, and a truck crossed the center line, and the rest came in fragments. Car accident. Coastal highway near Cancun. Body burned in the wreckage. Local regulations required cremation within 48 hours. Her final wishes, expressed to Derek months earlier apparently, were to have her ashes scattered in the Gulf. No body to bury, no goodbye. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember walking into the house. What I remember is the kitchen floor, the same linoleum where Doris and I had eaten 33 years of meals together, and my knees hitting it hard enough to leave bruises that lasted 2 weeks. Doris found out before I could drive to tell her. A neighbor saw something on the news, called to ask if it was true. Doris was crumpled on the front porch when I pulled up, her hand pressed against her chest, making a sound I'd never heard a human being make. The memorial service at First Baptist drew 200 people. Pastor Jim Decker, who'd married us and baptized Kristen, stood before the congregation and blessed an urn that contained nothing. People wept. They hugged me and said Kristen was with God now. I nodded and thanked them and felt nothing but the brass of my belt buckle digging into my palm. I threw myself into supporting Derek and the grandchildren. Emma was 5 then. Tyler was 3. They'd lost their mother, and their father was drowning in grief. That's what I told myself. I started sending money the following month. $750 on the first, transferred directly to Derek's Chase account. The amount came from a conversation where he mentioned their monthly shortfall after losing Kristen's income. I rounded up. I bought a green cloth-bound ledger from Office Depot and recorded every payment. Date, amount, note. The first entry read, April 1, 2022. $750. Tyler ear infection medication. Photos received. Derek had sent a picture of Tyler sleeping in his bed, a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his chin. The entries continued, month after month, year after year. Tyler speech therapy, $750. Emma dental emergency, $750. School supplies and clothes, $750. Water heater replacement, $750. Car repair, $750. By month 12, the photos stopped coming. By month 18, Derek stopped saying thank you, but the requests kept coming. And they got bigger. The call about Tyler's surgery came on a Thursday. Month 18. Derek's voice had that same high, tight quality from the night he told me Kristen was dead. But, Lloyd, buddy, I hate to even ask this. You've done so much already. But Tyler needs surgery. A specialist in Dallas says it's urgent. Something with his ears, affecting his balance. The insurance won't cover all of it, and I'm looking at $45,000 minimum. $45,000. The number hung in the air. I'll figure it out, I said. I took out a home equity loan against my house. The same house where I'd raised Kristen. The same house where Doris had her sewing room filled with quilts she'd never finish. The same house I'd paid off in 2019 after 22 years of mortgage payments. I signed the papers in the kitchen. The loan officer came to me because I couldn't take time off work. She spread the documents across the table where Doris used to pack my lunches, and I signed my name 11 times. The $45,000 went to Derek 3 days later. Tyler's surgery fund, I wrote in the green ledger. My doctor had warned me about the chest pains during my annual physical 6 months earlier. Stress, probably, he said. Maybe angina. We should run more tests. I nodded and never scheduled the follow-up. There wasn't time. There wasn't money. I took weekend jobs, holiday jobs, jobs that kept me working until my hands shook and my vision blurred. The service van hit 187,000 miles without the brake service it needed, because the grandchildren needed the money more than my van needed maintenance. Every Sunday after church, I drove to Restland Memorial Park. 2 headstones side by side. Doris May Wescott, 1969 to 2022, beloved wife and mother. And beside it, Kristen Marie Wescott Farrell, 1995 to 2022, beloved daughter and mother. I placed fresh flowers on both graves. Yellow roses for Doris, the ones she carried at our wedding. White lilies for Kristen, the ones I remembered from her high school graduation. Pastor Decker noticed the changes in me. He invited me to Sunday dinners after service, his wife making pot roast and mashed potatoes. I always declined. Too much work to do. Too many invoices to complete. Too many payments to calculate for grandchildren who depended on money I didn't have time to earn. Lloyd, he said to me once, standing in the church parking lot after service. Grief isn't something you outwork. It's something you walk through. I thanked him and drove to the cemetery anyway. The total in my green ledger reached $27,000 over 36 months. $750 every month, plus the occasional emergency Derek called about. A broken appliance here. A school expense there. Small amounts that added up to everything I had. Doris died 8 months after Kristen's memorial. The doctors called it a massive stroke, but I knew better. She died of grief. She died believing her only daughter was gone. She died in her sewing room, surrounded by quilts she'd started but never finished, patterns she'd bought but never cut, fabric she'd chosen but never stitched. I touched my belt buckle when the doctors delivered the news. The brass felt cold against my palm. I buried her next to the empty grave and went back to work the next day because that's what Lloyd does. The $27,000 total came after Doris passed. 28 more months of payments, made alone in the house where we'd built our life together. 3 weeks ago, a certified letter arrived from Guarantee Bank. I recognized the envelope. I knew what it contained. 60 days, until foreclosure proceedings on my home. I put it in the kitchen junk drawer without opening it. The $750 went out to Derek on the 1st of the month anyway. The grandchildren needed it more than I needed to read bad news I already understood. Now I stand in my workshop, holding the 1953 Honeywell Round. The same thermostat I restored the week before everything fell apart. Mechanical simplicity in my calloused hands. A coil of metal that knows when it's cold and tells the truth about it. I think about Ronnie's words. Saw your daughter yesterday. Honey blonde hair, green eyes. Looked real good. I think about 3 years of payments. 3 years of flowers on an empty grave. 3 years of chest pains ignored and maintenance deferred and foreclosure notices unopened. I think about Doris dying of grief for a woman who might have been sunbathing in Cancun. My hands stay steady on the vintage brass. They've been steady through 1,000 repairs, 1,000 emergencies, 1,000 moments when panic wouldn't help and only calm would serve. I set the thermostat down on my workbench. Walk inside. Open the kitchen drawer. The foreclosure notice weighs 3 ounces. I know because I weighed it on the postal scale before putting it back in the junk drawer, unopened. 3 ounces of paper representing 32 years of work. Now I sit at the kitchen table with a different kind of document in front of me. The green ledger I bought from Office Depot the month after Kristen died. I told Doris I needed to keep track of my charitable giving for tax purposes. She knew it wasn't charity. It was family. She didn't argue. She never argued when I was wrong about Kristen. The lamp casts a yellow glow across the table's surface. Outside, Garland sleeps in suburban darkness, streetlights flickering every 8 seconds the way they've done since the city switched to those energy-efficient bulbs 3 years ago. I know things like that. I know the timing of streetlights and the frequency of compressor hums and the exact pitch a motor makes when its bearings are failing. I know machines. I never learned to read people the way I read machines. Page 1 of the ledger. April 1, 2022. The first entry in my own handwriting, block letters because that's how Earl Briggs taught me to fill out work orders. Customer can't complain about what they can't misread, he said. $705 Tyler ear infection medication. Photos received. Those photos arrived 3 days later. Derek sent 3 of them. Tyler sleeping in his bed with a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his chin. Emma standing beside him, her hand on his forehead like she was checking for fever. A close-up of the prescription bottle with Tyler's name on the label. I looked at those photos every night for a week. My grandchildren. Proof they were real, that my money was helping them, that Kristen's death meant something because I could still protect her children. Page 2. May 1, 2022, 750. General support. Photo of Emma's artwork sent via text. I kept that artwork. A crayon drawing of a house with 4 stick figures out front. Mommy in heaven was written in Emma's 5-year-old spelling above what she meant to be the sun. Derek included a note. She asks about you every day, Lloyd. Page 3, June 1, 2022. My finger stops on this entry. The handwriting is the same, but something changed here. I wrote 750, school supplies and summer camp deposit. No photos, no photos. 2 words. I didn't think about at the time. Derek apologized, said his phone storage was full, said he'd send pictures of the kids at camp. He never did. July, August, September, October, November, December, 750 every month. The stated purposes change. Tyler's therapy, Emma's after-school program, utility bills Derek couldn't cover, car insurance for the vehicle Kristen left behind. But the 2 words stay the same through all of them. No photos. By month 6, Derek stopped sending proof. By month 6, I was sending money into a void and trusting his voice to fill it. I turned to month 12, March 2023, the first anniversary of Kristen's death. The entry reads 705, anniversary dinner for kids at Kristen's favorite restaurant. No card received. I'd sent a card with the money. A sympathy card with a handwritten note inside. Missing her with you. Love, Grandpa Lloyd. I asked Derek to read it to Emma and Tyler. He said he did. He said they cried. He said Tyler asked why Grandpa couldn't come visit, and Derek explained that the drive was too far and Grandpa had too much work. I believed him. I believed every word because the alternative was believing my daughter's husband was a liar, which meant believing my daughter had married a liar, which meant questioning my own judgment of the girl I raised. Easier to believe. Easier to send the 750 and trust. Month 18, September 2023. The entry takes up half a page because I needed space to write everything down. $45,000. Tyler's ear surgery. Doctor recommended specialist. Derek provided no documentation, but described procedure in detail. Home equity loan secured against house. Derek described the procedure in detail. I wrote that down to keep track of the specifics. His voice climbed high with panic. He deployed medical terminology I didn't understand, but trusted him to know. He said the surgery window was closing, that delayed treatment could cause permanent hearing loss, that my grandson might never hear properly again if I didn't act now. Now. That word appeared in every emergency call. We need it now, Lloyd. The appointment is now. They want payment now. Now meant no time to verify. Now meant trust or fail your grandchildren. Now meant Lloyd writes another check. I've been sitting at this table for 3 nights now, ever since Ronnie the mailman told me he saw Kristen at those condos on Stonebriar. 3 nights of reading entries, playing voicemails, listening for sounds I missed the first time. I pull my Samsung Galaxy from where it's charging on the counter. The phone is 4 years old, a model Doris picked because she said the buttons were easier for my calloused fingers to press. I never upgraded after she died. Seemed wrong to replace her last gift. The voicemail folder contains 47 messages. I save everything. Work messages from clients, reminders from my doctor's office about appointments I never scheduled, and Derek's calls. I select the message from 14 months ago, September 15th, 2024. The day before Tyler's speech evaluation, according to Derek. His voice fills the kitchen through the phone's speaker. But Lloyd, buddy, I hate to do this to you. I know you've given so much already, but Tyler's speech evaluation is tomorrow, and the therapist says he's regressing. Regressing, Lloyd, whatever that means. She says he needs intensive treatment, maybe 3 sessions a week. I don't know how I'm going to afford it. I'm drowning here. Drowning. Derek deployed that word in 6 voicemails across 2 years. I listen past his voice, past the practiced panic, past the sales training that taught him to raise his pitch when asking for money, to pause at emotional beats, to repeat the listener's name to build false intimacy. Lloyd, buddy, he called me buddy, a word you use for drinking partners and golf foursome acquaintances, not your dead wife's father. There, underneath Derek's performance, a sound I didn't notice when he called. A low hum, steady, mechanical, 60 Hertz. Airport terminal, HVAC. I'd serviced enough of them to know the signature. I rewind, play again, turn up the volume. The hum sits beneath Derek's voice like a bass note under a melody, and riding above it, something else. A muffled announcement. Gate change. Flight number. I reach for the magnifying glass on the table. The same one I use for thermostat restoration. Old habit. Something to hold while my brain works through a problem. Crest. IES. Trest West. Flight 2847 to Cancun, now boarding at gate C31. The announcement plays in the background of Derek's desperate call about Tyler's speech therapy. Southwest flies out of Terminal C at DFW. I've serviced their gate areas twice for the airport authority's maintenance contractor. I know the HVAC signature, know the speaker placement, know exactly what a boarding announcement sounds like through those ceiling tiles. Derek wasn't calling from home. He was calling from a gate, about to board a flight to Cancun, while telling me he was drowning. I set the phone down. My hands are steady. They've been steady through 1,000 emergencies, 1,000 moments when panic wouldn't help and only calm would serve. I open the voicemail folder again and begin systematic review. Message 23. November 2023. Derek, calling about Emma's emergency dental work. Voice high and tight. Background, the same 60 Hertz hum, different gate announcement. Houston hobby this time. Message 29. February 2024. Derek, calling about the broken water heater that couldn't wait. Background, airport HVAC signature. A woman's voice paging a passenger named Martinez. Message 31. April 2024. Derek calling about Tyler's tutoring needs. Background, the distinctive echo of a terminal concourse, the rolling rumble of wheeled luggage on tile floors. Message 34. July 2024. Derek calling about a rent increase he couldn't afford. Background, airport. The Southwest jingle playing from a nearby gate speaker. Message 37. September 2024. The Tyler speech therapy call I just analyzed. Airport. Cancun flight. Gate C31. Message 40. December 2024. Derek, calling about Christmas presents the kids needed. Background. Airport. HVAC. A final boarding announcement for Miami. Message 44. 3 weeks ago. Derek calling to thank me for the January payment. Voice warm and friendly, saying the kids were doing so much better. Background. Airport. Another Southwest flight. Another vacation I funded. 7 calls. 7 airport backgrounds. 7 trips. Derek took while claiming poverty, while I worked overtime with chest pains, while I let my van's transmission grind itself apart, while I mortgaged my house to fund emergencies that funded vacations. I flip back through the green ledger with new eyes. Every major extraction request came within days of these voicemails. Derek called begging from the boarding gate, collected my wire transfer, then flew to beach resorts while I crawled through attics in the Texas heat, wondering if my heart would finally give out. The pattern is mathematical now, provable. Each request built on the last. 750 became normal. So 750 more for emergencies became acceptable. So 2,000 $250 over 3 months for Emma's dental work felt reasonable. So $6,000 for Tyler's speech therapy across 8 months seemed necessary. So $45,000 for surgery became the only option. I add the emergency totals in the ledger margins. The numbers don't lie the way Derek does. Emma's dental, $2,250 across March, April, and May of 2023. 3 separate emergencies, same category, escalating urgency. Tyler's speech therapy, 705D times 8 months, $6,000 total. Treatment, I was never allowed to witness. Progress, I was never allowed to verify. Water heater replacement, $1,200 for Derek's apartment. The same apartment I was never invited to visit because the kids needed space from reminders of their mother. The phrase appears in my notes beside 17 different entries. The kids need space. The kids are struggling. The kids can't handle seeing you right now, Lloyd. The kids. Always the kids. Derek learned early that I couldn't refuse my grandchildren. So every request came wrapped in their names. Every extraction leveraged my love for Emma and Tyler against my own survival. I remember the conversation about visits. Propel, month 6. I asked to come see the kids for Tyler's 4th birthday. Derek's voice dropped. Apologetic. Almost gentle. Oh, Lloyd, buddy, I hate to say this, but the therapist thinks it's too soon. Tyler doesn't understand why Mommy's gone, and seeing you just reminds him of her. He cries for days afterward. Emma's been wetting the bed again. They need stability right now, not more grief. More grief. Monthly visits became quarterly. Quarterly became holidays only. Holidays became phone calls. Phone calls became nothing at all. Just Derek's voice asking for money while standing in airport terminals bound for places I couldn't afford to imagine. I asked to video call Emma for her 7th birthday. She was turning 7, and I'd missed 2 years of her life already. I wanted to see her face, to hear her voice, to know she was real and not just a story Derek told to extract money. She's overwhelmed today, Derek said. The party was too much. She's asking about Mommy and why Grandpa Lloyd doesn't visit. I think it's better if we don't stir things up. I sent a card with 50 inside to an address in Plano. I don't know if Emma ever received it. I don't know if she knows I sent it. I don't know anything about my grandchildren except what Derek chose to tell me. And now I know that Derek chooses lies the way he chooses vacation destinations, for maximum personal benefit. Pastor Jim Decker's invitations fill the calendar beside the ledger. Sunday dinners. Monthly offers from the man who'd married us and baptized Kristen. Lloyd, come eat with us. Carolyn makes pot roast. You shouldn't be alone so much. I declined every time. Too much work. Too many invoices, too many payments to calculate for grandchildren who apparently didn't need therapy or dental work, who needed their grandfather's money converted into airline tickets and resort reservations. The isolation grew month by month. Derek cut my access to the kids while I cut my access to everyone else, spending every free hour working to fund his scheme. The congregation at First Baptist watched me disappear into grief, and I let them believe that's all it was. Grief, not manipulation, not systematic extraction by a man who called me buddy while boarding flights with my money. I reach across the table for the foreclosure notice, pull it from the junk drawer where it sat for 3 weeks, slice open the envelope with my thumbnail. Guarantee Bank. Official notice of default, $38,847. Past due on home equity line of credit. Foreclosure proceedings to begin in 60 days, if payment not received. The house where Doris and I raised Kristen. The house where we ate 33 years of meals. The house where her sewing room sits untouched, quilts unfinished, patterns uncut, fabric chosen for projects she never started. 60 days. I look at the green ledger. $27,000 in base monthly payments. $45,000 in surgery loans. Emergency extractions totaling another $15,000 at minimum. Over $87,000 sent to a man who called from airports while claiming he couldn't pay rent. The phone sits on the table beside the ledger. 47 voicemails. 7 airport calls. 3 years of lies preserved in digital format. I close the ledger, set it on top of the foreclosure notice, place my phone beside both. The evidence is assembled now. The pattern is clear. The anger is forming, cold and mechanical, like a compressor cycling on for the first time in a season. No heat, no noise, just pressure building towards something useful. Derek dismantled my life from airport terminals. He made those calls with boarding passes in his pocket and resort reservations on his phone. He said Buddy and the kids, and I'm drowning while standing in line for first-class upgrades paid for with my second mortgage. I touch my belt buckle. The brass Doris chose. The leather she ordered from San Antonio. So you remember who you are. I know who I am. I'm a man who fixes things. A man who diagnoses problems and implements solutions. A man who spent 32 years learning to read the sounds that machines make when something's wrong. Derek's voice had the wrong frequency. I finally heard it. The towers at Stonebriar rose against the Frisco skyline like a monument to money I'd never have. Glass and steel. 18 stories of high-rise condos with a resort-style pool visible from the street. I counted 3 valets in matching polos, parking a Mercedes S-Class while I sat in my service van across the road. Magnetic signs advertising Wescott comfort solutions to anyone who cared to look. Nobody looked. In this neighborhood, work vans were invisible. Background noise. The help. I'd been parked here for 30 minutes, watching. I gripped the steering wheel with hands that had repaired 1,000 HVAC systems. The same hands that held Doris when she took her last breath. The same hands that wrote 36 checks to a man who was apparently visiting this building 4 times a week while telling me he couldn't afford groceries. A woman in yoga pants emerged from the lobby carrying a Pomeranian in a quilted carrier. A man in a tailored suit climbed into a BMW normal Tuesday morning in Frisco. Normal Tuesday morning, 2 blocks from my service route, where I'd been crawling through attics and sweating in 90-degree temperatures while my daughter lived in air-conditioned comfort under an assumed name. I pulled my van into the visitor lot and walked toward the management office. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and new money. The HVAC ran too cold, building management overcompensating for the Texas heat. Marble floors, a water feature against one wall, fresh flowers on a reception desk where a young woman smiled at me with practiced hospitality. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm looking for the property manager, Brenda Hollis." "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell her Lloyd Wescott is here." I serviced the rooftop units about 5 years back. Carrier units, the whole array. The receptionist dialed. I waited. 3 minutes. Brenda Hollis emerged from a glass-walled office behind her. She had aged since I'd last seen her. Gray threading through her dark hair now, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. But the sharp eyes were the same. The eyes of someone who'd learned to spot problems before they became emergencies. "Ha, Lloyd!" She extended her hand. "I remember you. Fixed that compressor in August when it was 104 degrees and my residents were threatening to sue. You had a dog back then. Little terrier. Sophie. She passed 2 years ago." Brenda studied my face. "You look like hell, Lloyd. What's going on? I need to ask you something. It's personal." She led me to her office and closed the door. The window behind her desk overlooked the pool, where a young couple lounged on padded chairs, sipping something tropical. My daughter died 3 years ago, I said. Car accident in Mexico. Body cremated. Ashes scattered. Brenda's expression shifted. I'm sorry. My mailman saw her yesterday. Here, signing for a package at this building. The shift in Brenda's face happened fast. Sympathy to confusion to something harder. Recognition. Your daughter's name? Kristen Wescott Farrell. But Ronnie said the signature read K. Wescott. Brenda turned to her computer. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the speed of someone who'd typed these searches 1,000 times. K. Wescott, she said. Unit 1847. Moved in 35 months ago. Pays on time. Keeps to herself. She paused. Listed as a divorced marketing consultant who works remotely. 35 months. Kristen died 36 months ago. 1 month to set up her new life. Does she have a regular visitor? I asked. Man named Derek Farrell. Brenda typed again. The screen reflected in her reading glasses. Derek Farrell. She scrolled. Visitor badge issued 412 times in the last 36 months. Average of 4 visits per week. More scrolling. Usually stays overnight. Signs out the next morning. 4 visits a week, most of them overnight. For 3 years. I did the math. 600 visits, roughly, while I placed flowers on an empty grave and mortgaged my house to fund emergencies that never existed. Past. Lloyd. Brenda's voice was careful now. What exactly happened to your daughter? I told her. Everything. The call from Derek. The cremation. The 3 years of monthly payments. The voicemails with airport sounds. The foreclosure notice sitting in my kitchen drawer. When I finished, Brenda's jaw was tight. Her hands pressed flat against her desk. Her expression hardened. My ex tried something similar. 200,000 in hidden accounts. Property in an LLC I didn't know existed. I found out 6 months after the papers were signed when his girlfriend posted photos of their new boat. She turned back to her computer. I can show you the security footage. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Date stamp, 3 weeks ago. Derek Farrell walking through the lobby with an overnight bag. He pressed the elevator button. Waited. The doors opened and a woman stepped out to greet him. Honey blonde hair in expensive balayage. Green eyes behind designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. Tan skin. Designer athleisure that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. My daughter, Kristen, laughing at something Derek said, taking his arm, leading him toward the parking garage. I watched 4 more clips. Different dates, same pattern. Derek arriving with bags. Derek leaving with Kristen. Dinner clothes, beach clothes. Once, matching luggage for what looked like a trip. I can print summaries of the visitor logs, Brenda said. Timestamps, duration of visits, everything. Do it. She printed 12 pages. I folded them and put them in my back pocket. Lloyd. Brenda caught my arm as I turned to leave. Whatever you're planning to do with this, be careful. People who fake their own deaths don't usually react well when they get caught. I'm not planning anything, I said. Just gathering information. She nodded, like she didn't believe me. I didn't blame her. I drove back to Garland and sat in my driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. The house felt different now. Smaller. The mortgage payment I couldn't afford suddenly felt like theft rather than debt. I opened my laptop on the kitchen table and typed Kristen Wescott Instagram into the search bar. The profile loaded in 3 seconds. Kristen Wescott. 847 followers. The profile photo showed my daughter in designer sunglasses by a resort pool, cocktail in hand, smile wide and carefree. The bio read, "Living my best life. Manifesting abundance. DFW based." I clicked on the first photo. Posted 3 weeks ago. Kristen, lounging by a pool in Cancun. Frozen margarita sweating on the table beside her. Caption: "Sometimes you just have to say yes to yourself." The next photo. Emma and Tyler building sandcastles on a beach. My grandchildren. The same grandchildren Derek told me were struggling with their mother's death, were too fragile to see their grandfather, were overwhelmed by grief and acting out. They looked happy, healthy, normal kids on a beach vacation, covered in sand and grinning at the camera. I set down the phone, picked it up again, kept scrolling. Emma eating ice cream at what looked like a theme park. Tyler on a carousel horse, waving. Both of them in matching swimsuits by a hotel pool. Both of them opening presents on what must have been Christmas morning. Paper scattered across a living room I didn't recognize. The timestamps told their own story. These photos were posted 2 to 3 weeks after I sent each monthly payment. The Christmas photos appeared December 28th, 4 days after I wired Derek $750 for holiday gifts the kids needed. I kept scrolling. A photo from 2 weeks ago. Kristen holding up a cream-colored handbag with gold hardware. Kate Spade. The same bag Ronnie saw her sign for. The caption read, "The universe provides when you put out the right energy." The universe. The universe that provided through my home equity loan. The universe that manifested abundance through my missed mortgage payments and ignored chest pains and service van with failing transmission that I couldn't afford to fix. I scrolled to the comments. "So jealous," one read, "living your best life." Another, "Girl, you deserve it. Self-care queen." I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking for the first time since this started. Tyler's speech therapy had been $750 a month for 8 months. $6,000 for therapy that never happened, for a boy who was apparently healthy enough to ride carousels and build sandcastles in Cancun. Emma's dental emergency had been $2,250 over 3 months. Emergency work that was actually ice cream cones and theme park tickets. The $45,000 for Tyler's ear surgery. The loan against my house. The debt that was about to cost me everything I'd built over 32 years. I opened Instagram again and screenshotted every photo, every timestamp, every caption about manifesting abundance while I worked overtime with chest pains that my doctor said needed monitoring. Then I picked up my phone and called Derek. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Pass, Lloyd, buddy. What's up?" "I'm going to be in Plano tomorrow," I said. My voice came out flat, measured. The same voice I used when telling a customer their compressor had failed and the repair would cost $4,000. Thought I'd drop off some birthday money for Emma. In person. Silence on the line. 3 seconds. 4. "That's so generous, Lloyd." Derek's voice pitched higher. The sales training kicking in, trying to redirect. "But you know, the kids have school, and I've got this huge presentation at work tomorrow, and I'll come by the apartment around 3 after school." 5 seconds of silence now. I could hear him breathing, could hear something else underneath his breath, a low mechanical hum I recognized immediately. 60 Hertz, airport terminal HVAC. Actually, Lloyd, buddy, I should tell you. Derek's voice cracked slightly. "We're not at the apartment right now. Tyler had a thing. We're at the hospital." "Which hospital?" Long pause. Too long. "Children's Medical." I knew Children's Medical Center in Dallas. I'd serviced their auxiliary generator building 3 years ago when their backup cooling failed during a summer outage. I knew exactly what their ventilation sounded like. It didn't sound like airport terminals. "Children's Medical," I repeated. Yeah, just a checkup thing." Routine. But they're being thorough, you know how it is. I know how it is, I said. I hung up without saying goodbye. The phone sat in my hand. Derek's voice still echoed in my ears, climbing higher with each lie, the sales training failing him when the customer already knew the product was defective. I walked to the living room and stood before the mantel. Doris's photograph sat in the same silver frame I'd bought for our 25th anniversary. She was smiling in that picture, taken at a church picnic 3 months before Kristen died, before the grief that would kill her. My wife died believing her only daughter preceded her. She died of a stroke induced by grief. Grief for a woman who was sunbathing in Cancun, posting about the universe providing, signing for designer handbags with the money I'd scraped together from overtime and second mortgages. I touched my belt buckle. The brass Doris chose. The leather that had molded to my waist over 20 years. So you remember who you are. I knew who I was. I was a man who fixed things, a man who diagnosed problems and implemented solutions, a man who'd spent 32 years learning to recognize when a system was failing and what needed to be done to repair it. This system was beyond repair, but the people responsible could still be held accountable. I pulled the folded visitor logs from my back pocket and spread them across the kitchen table. 12 pages of timestamps, 600 visits, 3 years of lies documented in black and white. I added the Instagram screenshots I'd saved to my phone. Cancun, theme parks, ice cream, designer bags. The struggling grandchildren, living lives of comfort on money extracted from their grandfather through fabricated emergencies. I added my green ledger with its careful records of every payment. $27,000 in monthly transfers, $45,000 in surgery, loans, another $15,000 in emergency extractions I'd tracked across the margins, $87,000 minimum. This was everything I'd built over 32 years. The house, the business, the family. And they'd been dismantling it while I placed flowers on an empty grave. I opened my laptop again and searched for Texas insurance fraud penalties. 3rd-degree felony, 2 to 10 years in state prison. The statute of limitations was 7 years. This 3-year-old fraud fell well within range. I made a list on the back of an envelope. The same kind of list I made before complex service calls. Call Pastor Decker tomorrow morning. He officiated Kristen's memorial. He blessed an empty urn while my congregation wept. He deserved to know the truth, and I needed a witness when I confronted Derek. Visit the insurance company that paid the death claim. Their fraud investigators would want everything I'd gathered. The visitor logs, the Instagram photos, the timestamps that proved Kristen had been alive and vacationing while they processed her death benefit. Contact a lawyer, someone who handled fraud cases and family law. Someone who could tell me what my options were for recovering money stolen through fabricated emergencies. Someone who could explain grandparent visitation rights when the parents were about to face criminal charges. I looked at Doris's photograph again. My wife, who made sweet tea for every guest and packed my lunch for 28 years. My wife who died 8 months after her daughter, never knowing that daughter was alive. Kristen had let her mother die, believing a lie. Derek had called me buddy while boarding flights funded by my mortgage payments. Both of them had stood in church while Pastor Decker blessed an empty urn, accepting condolences and sympathy from people who would have spit on them if they'd known the truth. The anger settled into something cold and mechanical, a compressor cycling on, pressure building toward something useful. I folded the envelope with my list and tucked it into my shirt pocket, gathered the visitor logs, and stacked them beside my green ledger. Set my phone face down on the table so I wouldn't see Derek's name if he tried to call. Tomorrow, I would start the process of dismantling the lie they'd built around my grief. Tomorrow, I would watch their careful construct begin to collapse. Tonight, I sat in the house they were about to cost me. I touched the brass buckle my wife gave me. I looked at her photograph on the mantel. I found out, I told her. I finally found out. The photograph didn't answer. Photographs never do, but the house settled around me. Old wood, familiar sounds, US, something I could trust. I went to bed at 8, set the alarm for 6. Tomorrow required precision. Pastor Jim Decker sat behind his desk at First Baptist Church of Garland, hands folded over a Bible he'd been reading when I knocked on his office door. The Sunday morning service had ended 2 hours ago. The congregation had gone home to pot roasts and football games. The building held that quiet of sacred spaces between services. Hymn echoes faded, pews empty, air still. Crew. Lloyd. He stood and extended his hand. You sounded urgent on the phone. I set the manila folder on his desk. 12 pages of visitor logs from Brenda Hollis. 47 printed Instagram screenshots. 3 pages of voicemail transcripts with audio analysis notes. My green ledger with 36 months of payments documented in my own handwriting. I need to show you something, I said. It's about Kristen. Pastor Decker sat back down. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, with the soft-spoken manner of a man who'd spent 4 decades listening to confessions and delivering comfort. He'd married Doris and me in 1991. He'd baptized Kristen when she was 8. He'd officiated both memorial services, Doris's genuine funeral and Kristen's empty urn ceremony. What about Kristen? She's alive. The words hung in the air between us. Pastor Decker's face didn't change. He'd heard too many things in this office to react quickly. Tell me, he said. I told him. Ronnie the mailman seeing Kristen sign for a package in Frisco. The visitor logs showing Derek's 412 logged badge entries to Unit 1847 over 36 months. The Instagram account with vacation photos and designer purchases. The voicemails with airport HVAC signatures in the background. The $27,000 in monthly payments for emergencies that never existed. The $45,000 home equity loan for surgery that never happened. Pastor Decker listened without interrupting. His hands stayed folded. His expression remained neutral, but something shifted behind his eyes as I laid each piece of evidence on his desk. When I finished, he picked up one of the Instagram screenshots. Kristen, lounging by a resort pool in Cancun, frozen margarita in hand. The caption read, "Sometimes you just have to say yes to yourself." Pastor Decker's hand came down on his desk. The Bible jumped. I'd never seen him strike anything in 30 years. I blessed an empty urn, he said. His voice had changed. The pastoral softness was gone, replaced by something I'd never heard from him. I stood before this congregation and blessed an empty urn while she was sunbathing in Mexico. Yes. He set down the screenshot and picked up another. Emma and Tyler building sandcastles on a beach. The same grandchildren Derek told me were too fragile to see their grandfather. I comforted you for 3 years. Pastor Decker's jaw tightened. I watched you age a decade in months. I watched you work yourself half to death. I held your hand at Doris's funeral and told you that at least your wife was reunited with your daughter. Doris died believing Kristen was gone, I said. The grief killed her. Pastor Decker stood and walked to the window overlooking the church parking lot. His shoulders were rigid under his clerical collar. I've counseled families through terrible things in this office, he said without turning around. Addiction, abuse, infidelity, but I've never seen anything like this. He turned back to face me. The soft-spoken minister was gone. In his place stood someone harder. When you confront them, I will be there. I will bear witness to what they've done. This congregation deserves to know that the grief they shared was manufactured. The sympathy they offered was exploited. The urn they mourned was empty. I nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. Pastor Decker returned to his desk and pulled a business card from his Rolodex. Margaret Chen. She's a member of Grace Methodist in Richardson, but she's done legal work for families in our congregation. Family law and fraud recovery. She'll know how to proceed. I took the card. Thank you. P. Lloyd. Pastor Decker caught my arm as I gathered the evidence folder. When this comes out, and it will come out, there will be people who ask why you didn't notice sooner. People who question your judgment. People who think you were naive. I know. You weren't naive. You were faithful. You trusted because that's what good people do. The sin belongs to those who exploited that trust, not to you for giving it. I touched my belt buckle. The brass Doris chose. I'll call you when I've set the time. Monday morning, I called the insurance company's claims department. They transferred me 3 times before I reached the special investigations unit. The hold music was generic piano, the kind designed to make waiting feel productive. I sat in my service van in the church parking lot, evidence folder on the passenger seat, phone pressed to my ear. Special investigations. This is Webb. My name is Lloyd Wescott. 3 years ago, my daughter Kristen Wescott Farrell was reported dead in a car accident in Mexico. Her husband, Derek Farrell, collected a $250,000 life insurance payout from your company. Silence on the line. The generic piano had stopped. Go on, Webb said. My daughter is alive. She's been living in a condo in Frisco, Texas, under her maiden name for 36 months. Her husband has visited her an average of 4 times per week during that entire period. I have documentation. What kind of documentation? Visitor logs from the building management. Security camera footage. Instagram photos showing her alive and vacationing. USPS, electronic signature capture from a package delivery 3 weeks ago. Voicemail recordings of her husband calling me from airports while claiming to be at home. Webb's voice changed. The bored customer service tone disappeared, replaced by something sharper. Mr. Wescott, I'm a former Army CID agent. I specialize in death fraud cases. How soon can you meet with me? Today, now, if you have time. Where are you located? Garland. But I can drive anywhere in the Metroplex. Our Dallas office. 2100 Ross Avenue. I'll meet you in the lobby in 90 minutes. Marcus Webb shook my hand in the lobby of a glass tower downtown. One firm pump, released and led me to a conference room on the 14th floor without small talk. He was a compact man in his 50s, with a military haircut gone gray. Let's see what you have, he said. I spread the evidence across the table. Webb studied each piece without speaking. Visitor logs, Instagram screenshots, voicemail transcripts with my handwritten notes about the airport audio signatures, the green ledger documenting 3 years of payments. After 15 minutes, he looked up. Texas Penal Code, Section 35.02. Filing a fraudulent insurance claim is a 3rd-degree felony. 2 to 10 years in state prison. Fines up to $10,000. Both of them? Both. Your daughter conspired to fake her death. Her husband collected the payout. Conspiracy and collection. The statute of limitations is 7 years. This 3-year-old fraud is well within prosecutable range. What happens next? Webb leaned back in his chair. First, we verify. I'll subpoena the condo records independently. Pull the USPS delivery confirmation. Cross-reference the Instagram account with IP addresses. Build a case that doesn't rely solely on your evidence. What do you need from me? Everything you have. Copies of the visitor logs, the screenshots, The voicemail recordings. Especially the recordings. He nodded at the transcript. You worked airports? Serviced DFW terminals twice. That explains it. Webb pointed to the green ledger. That's $27,000 in documented payments for fraudulent emergencies? $27,000 in monthly payments. Another $45,000 in a home equity loan for surgery that never happened. Plus smaller emergency requests, totaling around $15,000 more. $87,000 extracted under false pretenses while simultaneously collecting a $250,000 death benefit. Webb shook his head. Your son-in-law is facing significant time. Your daughter even more, since the scheme couldn't have happened without her cooperation. The insurance company will pursue civil recovery, independently of any criminal charges. We'll want the full $250,000 back, plus investigative costs and penalties. The criminal case strengthens our civil claim, and vice versa. I gathered my evidence. I have a meeting with an attorney this afternoon about my own recovery options. Good. You'll want to file separately from our action. Different damages, different timeline. Webb stood and shook my hand again. Mr. Wescott, I've worked death fraud cases for 15 years. Usually, it's strangers scamming strangers. This is family. I know. That makes it worse, but it also makes the evidence stronger. No one questions why you trusted them. No one asks why you didn't verify. They were family. You had every reason to believe. I left the building with copies of Webb's card and a promise that he'd be in touch within 72 hours with preliminary verification results. Margaret Chen's law office occupied a converted Victorian house in downtown Garland, 2 blocks from the courthouse. The waiting room smelled like old wood and fresh coffee. Law books lined shelves that had once held china. Her assistant, a young woman with purple-streaked hair and efficient manner, showed me to the conference room. Margaret Chen was 48, with reading glasses she never removed and a pen that moved across her legal pad before I finished sentences. She'd been practicing law for 22 years, according to the certificates on her wall. Family law, fraud recovery, state disputes. Pastor Decker speaks highly of you, she said without looking up from the visitor logs. Says you're the most decent man he knows. I don't feel particularly decent right now. You feel angry. That's appropriate. She set down the logs and picked up the Instagram screenshots. This is comprehensive documentation, Mr. Wescott. Most clients come to me with suspicions. You've come with proof. I've been gathering evidence for 72 hours. It shows. She spread the screenshots across the table. Texas allows treble damages for fraud. That means if you can prove $27,000 in fraudulent payments, you could potentially recover $81,000. Plus attorney fees, plus the home equity loan they induced you to take under false pretenses. What about my grandchildren? Margaret looked up. Tell me about them. Emma is 8. Tyler is 6. Derek told them I didn't want to see them. Told them I'd abandoned the family. I haven't spoken to them in over 2 years. Texas Family Code, Section 153.433. Margaret pulled a legal pad toward her and began writing. Grandparents can petition for visitation rights when denial would significantly impair the children's physical health or emotional well-being, and criminal charges against their parents. Strengthen your position considerably. She kept writing. If Derek and Kristen are facing prosecution, the court will want to ensure the children have stable family support. You're their biological grandfather. You have documented history of involvement before the alleged death. You have proof that you were denied access based on false pretenses. What are my chances? Margaret set down her pen. With this evidence? with both parents potentially facing prison time, with proof that they lied to the children about your involvement. She allowed herself a small smile. Your chances are excellent, Mr. Wescott. I'd go so far as to say you have grounds for temporary custody while criminal proceedings are ongoing. When can we file? I'll have preliminary paperwork ready within 48 hours. We'll wait for the insurance investigation to confirm your evidence independently, then coordinate our civil filing with their criminal referral. Maximum pressure. Minimum opportunity for them to hide assets or flee jurisdiction. I left Margaret Chen's office with her card in my wallet and a retainer agreement signed in duplicate. One more stop. Brenda Hollis met me in the lobby of the Towers at Stonebriar with an envelope in her hand. The USPS electronic signature capture, she said. I called in a favor with a friend at the regional distribution center. Pulled the digital record from Ronnie's delivery scanner. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printout showing a stylized signature. K. Wescott. Below it, a timestamp, GPS coordinates, and the delivery address for Unit 1847. This is federal documentation, Brenda said, independent of anything from my building systems. Independent of anything you gathered on your own. If your daughter's lawyers try to claim the visitor logs were fabricated or the Instagram account was hacked, this signature is verified by the United States Postal Service. Thank you, Brenda. My ex-husband tried to gaslight me for 3 years, she said. Told me I was crazy for questioning his stories. Told me I was paranoid. Told me I should trust him because that's what wives do. She touched my arm. You're not crazy, Lloyd. You're not paranoid. And you're not wrong to stop trusting. I drove home through the evening traffic and spread everything across my kitchen table. Visitor logs from Brenda. Security footage stills. Instagram screenshots. Voicemail transcripts. The USPS signature capture. Insurance claim documents Webb had promised to verify. My green ledger with its 36 months of careful entries. The evidence covered the entire table. 36 months of lies, organized. My phone sat at the edge of the spread. I picked it up, dialed Derek's number. He answered on the 4th ring. Kate's a Lloyd buddy. I was just thinking about you. I'm picking up Emma and Tyler from school tomorrow. My voice came out flat. The same tone I used when telling a customer their compressor was dead and couldn't be revived. 3 o'clock at Ridgeview Elementary. You'll meet me there. Silence on the line. 4 seconds. 5. Kristen? A pause. Past. Lloyd, what are you? I'm picking up Emma and Tyler from school tomorrow, I repeated. 3 o'clock, Ridgeview Elementary. Kate, Lloyd, buddy. Let's talk about this. Derek's voice climbed higher. The sales training deploying, trying to redirect. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. We should sit down, just the two of us, work through whatever's bothering you. I've talked enough, Derek. I cut him off. For 3 years I talked. I sent money and asked questions and accepted whatever answers you gave me. Tomorrow, I'll be listening. Bring Kristen. Lloyd, this isn't fair. You can't just demand. 3 o'clock. Ridgeview Elementary. Bring Kristen. I hung up. The phone sat silent in my hand. No callback. No text. Derek was probably standing in whatever room he occupied right now, staring at his phone, the way I'd stared at foreclosure notices and medical bills and monthly payment requests for 3 years. The difference was that I had evidence. I had allies. I had Pastor Jim Decker willing to witness the confrontation. I had Marcus Webb building a criminal case. I had Margaret Chen drafting custody papers. 3 months ago, I would have accepted another excuse from Derek. Found a reason to believe him. Convinced myself that I was misunderstanding, that family didn't lie like this, that surely there was an explanation, Tomorrow, I would demand the truth, and I would have the documentation to verify every word. I touched my belt buckle. The brass Doris chose 20 years ago, darkened now with the patina of every day since. I found out, I told her photograph on the mantel. And tomorrow, I'm going to do something about it. The evidence file covered the kitchen table. 36 months of lies documented and organized for justice. 72 hours of investigation assembled into a weapon. Pastor Decker would witness. Margaret Chen would file. Marcus Webb would prosecute. And tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Derek Farrell would finally face a question he couldn't deflect and couldn't charm his way around. Where is my daughter? Bring Kristen. Tomorrow at 3. Ridgeview Elementary. Witnesses. Evidence. 36 months of lies ending in a school parking lot. The circular pickup lane at Ridgeview Elementary filled with idling subs at 2:40 p.m. I pulled my service van into the visitor lot and killed the engine, parking where I had clear sightlines to the main entrance and the teacher monitoring stations along the sidewalk. Pastor Jim Decker sat beside me in the passenger seat. He'd worn his clerical collar without me asking. When I picked him up at the church 40 minutes earlier, he was already dressed for witness, the white tab at his throat, a deliberate choice of moral authority. You ready? He asked. Been ready for 3 years. Just didn't know it. My hands rested on the evidence folder. Steady. Through the windshield, I watched parents check phones in their minivans. Teachers, in reflective vests, positioned themselves at crosswalks. The 3 p.m. dismissal bell would ring in 20 minutes. Everything I'd built over 32 years came down to the next hour. The house, the business, the grandchildren. If I was wrong, I'd lose it all. But I wasn't wrong. The evidence was irrefutable. Margaret Chen, my attorney, had parked her sedan 2 spaces down. She sat with copies of everything in a folder on her passenger seat, ready to provide legal documentation if the confrontation required immediate action. We'd agreed she would observe unless Derek escalated beyond words. Across the street, a black sedan sat in the parking lot of a strip mall. Marcus Webb, from the insurance company's Special Investigations Unit. He'd positioned himself with a camera and a notepad, documenting for the criminal case file. When I'd called him yesterday to confirm the time and location, he'd said only, "I'll be there. Don't look for me." I looked anyway. Couldn't help it. At 2:58 p.m., Derek's silver Accord pulled into the lot. He parked 3 spaces from my van. Through his windshield, I watched his face drain of color when he saw Pastor Decker's clerical collar through my passenger window. Derek sat in his car for 30 seconds. His hands stayed on the steering wheel. I could see him breathing, see him trying to compose the performance he'd need to deliver. He got out of the car, straightened his polo shirt, ran a hand through his hair, walked toward us with his sales smile, already cracking at the edges. "Lloyd!" His voice pitched too high. And Pastor Decker. What a surprise. I held up my hand. The gesture stopped him, 3 feet from my van. "Where's Kristen?" Derek's smile froze. "Whole. A Lloyd, buddy, I don't know what you think is happening here, but Kristen is. Alive." The word landed like a compressor. Failure. Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Living at the towers at Stonebriar," I continued. "Unit 1847, under her maiden name. You visited her 4 times a week for 3 years. I pulled out my phone and opened the Instagram screenshots first. Kristen in Cancun 3 weeks ago. Emma and Tyler building sandcastles at a resort. The Kate Spade handbag she signed for at the condo, the one that costs more than my monthly grocery budget. I held the phone toward Derek's face. The universe provides when you put out the right energy. That's what she wrote. Derek's hand moved unconsciously toward his pants pocket. The deck of cards he always carried. The magician's comfort gesture when sleight of hand fails. Those photos could be, anyone could have. I pulled the visitor logs from my shirt pocket and spread them on the hood of my van. 412 visits documented. I tapped the pages. Timestamps. Duration. Every overnight stay recorded by building security. The property manager pulled these herself. A mother in a nearby SUV glanced our direction. She was applying lipstick in her rearview mirror, but her eyes kept flicking toward the scene forming in the visitor lot. I have the voicemails, Derek. I pressed play on the recording from 14 months ago. Derek's voice filled the air between us, high and tight with rehearsed panic. Lloyd, buddy, I hate to even ask this. You've done so much already. But Tyler needs surgery. Behind his recorded voice, the distinctive 60 Hertz hum of airport terminal HVAC. The signature hum of terminal HVAC running at capacity. I'd calibrated 100 of those systems. A muffled gate announcement. Southwest Flight 2847 to Cancun. That hum, Derek, I said. That's airport terminal, HVAC. I've serviced 100 of them. You were at DFW Gate C31, boarding a flight to Cancun while telling me you were drowning. A teacher monitoring the pickup lane took 3 steps toward us. She stopped when Pastor Decker raised his hand slightly, a gesture that said, "Give us a moment." 7 calls with airport backgrounds, I continued. 7 trips you took while claiming poverty. While I worked overtime with chest pains. While I mortgaged my house to pay for Tyler's surgery that never happened. Derek's breathing went shallow. His hand stayed frozen near his pocket, the cards untouched. I pulled the USPS signature capture from the folder. K. Wescott signed for that package at the Frisco condo. Time-stamped. GPS verified. Federal documentation, Derek. Independent of anything else I've gathered. Parents in the pickup line were watching now. A man in a pickup truck lowered his window. A woman in yoga pants stopped pretending to check her phone. The insurance company knows, I said. Marcus Webb from the Special Investigations Unit is across the street right now, documenting this conversation. Texas Penal Code, Section 35-2. Filing a fraudulent insurance claim is a third-degree felony. 2 to 10 years. Derek's face went gray. You collected $250,000 for a woman who never died. You extracted $27,000 from me over 3 years for emergencies that funded your vacations. I set down the evidence and looked directly into his eyes. You let my wife die believing her daughter was gone. Cass, Lloyd, we can work this out. Derek's voice cracked. The sales persona splintering. Think about the kids. I have thought about the kids. My voice dropped. The Texas drawl thickened the way it does when I'm past anger into something colder. I thought about them every Sunday when I put flowers on an empty grave. I thought about them when I took out a second mortgage to pay for Tyler's surgery that never happened. I thought about them when Doris had her stroke 8 months after the memorial. Pastor Decker stepped forward. The clerical collar caught the afternoon sun. I blessed an empty urn, Derek. His voice carried across the visitor lot, the pastoral softness replaced by steel. I stood before my congregation and blessed an empty urn while Kristen was sunbathing in Mexico. I comforted Lloyd for 3 years. I held his hand at Doris's funeral and told him his wife was reunited with their daughter. Derek took a step backward. You let Doris die of grief for someone who was in Cancun, Pastor Decker said. You want forgiveness? Start with the truth. A mother nearby gasped. The sound cut through the ambient noise of idling engines and distant children's voices. Phones appeared in hands around the pickup lane. The black sedan from across the street pulled into the lot. Marcus Webb behind the wheel, insurance company logo visible on the door. He parked 10 feet from us and stepped out with a folder of official paperwork. Derek saw the logo. His last support collapsed. It was Kristen's idea. The words came out in a whisper. Pause. All of it. She planned everything. The fake accident. The cremation story. The monthly payments. His voice broke. She said no one would get hurt. I stared at the man who'd called me buddy for 3 years while stealing everything I'd built. Doris is dead, Derek. She died believing her daughter was gone. That's who got hurt. The school doors opened. The 3 p.m. dismissal bell had rung somewhere inside, and children began emerging in clusters with their teachers. 3rd graders with backpacks. 1st graders holding hands with playground monitors. The ordinary chaos of a suburban afternoon. I looked past Derek to the school entrance. Emma appeared with her class. She was taller than I remembered. 8 years old now, 3 years of growth I'd missed. Her teacher said something, pointing toward the pickup lane. But Emma wasn't listening. She was scanning the lot. Her eyes moved across the SUVs and minivans, looking for something, looking for someone. Her gaze found my service van. The magnetic signs on the door, Wescott Comfort Solutions. The same sign she'd seen in our driveway during Sunday dinners before everything fell apart. Recognition crossed her face. She broke from her teacher's supervision and ran across the sidewalk, through the teacher monitoring station, past the line of waiting cars. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders. Her shoes slapped the pavement. Grandpa Lloyd! The words came out like she'd been practicing them in secret. The name she hadn't been allowed to say for 3 years. I dropped to one knee on the parking lot asphalt, and she threw herself into my arms. The impact nearly knocked me backward. Her arms wrapped around my neck with the fierce strength of a child who'd been waiting. Grandpa Lloyd, she said again, her face pressed into my shoulder. I knew you'd come back. I knew it. She pulled back just far enough to show me what she'd been clutching against her chest. A 4x6 photograph, edges worn from handling, corners bent from being hidden in places adults wouldn't look. The photo showed me holding her at her 4th birthday party. Doris's purple frosted cake sat on the table behind us. Emma's arms were around my neck, the same position she'd taken just now. Both of us were smiling, genuine smiles, the kind that come from family. I kept it, Emma said. Mommy said you didn't want to see us anymore, but I kept it. In my sock drawer, I knew she was wrong. I touched the photograph. The image of Doris's cake, the purple frosting she'd made from scratch because Emma's favorite color was purple. The last birthday before the phone call that destroyed everything. I never stopped wanting to see you, I said. Never. Not for one single day. Tyler appeared at the edge of the pickup lane. 6 years old now, standing with his 1st grade teacher, watching his sister hug a man he barely remembered. The teacher looked uncertain, glancing between us and Derek, trying to understand what was happening. Derek hadn't moved. He stood frozen where I'd left him, face slack, watching his daughter embrace the grandfather he'd convinced her was gone. Tyler, I called. Come here, son. He hesitated, looked at his teacher, looked at his father. It's okay, the teacher said softly. She'd seen enough to understand something important was happening, even if she didn't know the details. Tyler walked toward us slowly. When he reached Emma and me, he stopped 3 feet away, uncertain. I'm your Grandpa Lloyd, I said. I used to hold you when you were a baby. I used to take you to the park by our house in Garland. He studied my face. Something flickered in his eyes. A memory, maybe, or the recognition of family features he'd seen in mirrors. You fixed our air conditioner once, he said. When I was little, I remember the truck with the words on it. That's right, same truck. I pointed to my service van. Same words. Emma grabbed her brother's hand. See? I told you Grandpa was real. I showed you the picture. Tyler looked at the photograph Emma still clutched. At me. At his father standing motionless in the parking lot. Why did Mommy say you didn't want us? The question cut through me. I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old. I didn't have an answer that would make sense to anyone who hadn't lived through the last 3 years. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said. Big mistakes. But I never stopped loving you. Either of you. Marcus Webb approached with his folder of official documents. He nodded to me once, then turned to Derek. Mr. Farrell, I'm Marcus Webb with American Family Insurance Special Investigations. I need to ask you some questions regarding policy claim number 7734889, filed March 2022 for the death benefit of Kristen Marie Wescott Farrell. Derek's face had gone completely blank. The sales training, the charm, the rehearsed deflections, all of it stripped away, leaving only a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse in a school parking lot. I want a lawyer, he said. That's your right. Webb handed him a business card. Our office will be in contact. I'd recommend not leaving the state. Pastor Decker put his hand on my shoulder. Haas, Lloyd, maybe we should take the children somewhere quieter. I looked at Emma, still pressed against my side, her hand gripping mine with the determination of a child who'd finally gotten what she'd been waiting for. At Tyler, standing close enough now that I could smell the school cafeteria on his clothes. Chicken nuggets probably, and chocolate milk. My grandchildren, real and present, and looking at me with faces I'd only seen in old photographs and fabricated Instagram posts. The ice cream place on Main Street, I said. The one with the purple cow outside. Emma's face lit up. I remember that place. Grandma Doris took me there for my birthday. She did. Every year until... I stopped. Every year, Margaret Chen appeared at my elbow. I'll handle things here with Mr. Webb. Take the children. We'll talk tomorrow about next steps. I stood up, Emma's hand still in mine. Tyler had moved closer, close enough that I could reach out and touch his shoulder, which I did. Let's go get ice cream, I said. We walked toward my service van, the same van that had seemed invisible in this neighborhood an hour ago, the helps vehicle, background noise. Now, it was the escape route, the path away from 3 years of lies and toward something that might eventually feel like family again. Behind us, Derek remained frozen in the parking lot. Parents in the pickup line had their phones out, recording or taking photos, documenting the scene they didn't fully understand but recognized as significant. Teachers huddled together, speaking in low voices. Marcus Webb was on his phone, probably calling the district attorney's office. Pastor Decker walked beside me to the van. I'll sit in back with Tyler. Give you and Emma the front. I helped Tyler into the back seat, helped Emma into the front. Her photograph of the birthday party sat on her lap, the image of Doris's purple cake facing up. Grandpa? Emma said as I started the engine. Yeah? Is Mommy in trouble? I looked at my granddaughter, 8 years old. 3 years of lies piled on top of a childhood that should have been simple and safe. Yes, I said. Your mommy did some things that weren't right, but that's not your fault, and it's not your job to fix it. That's for grown-ups to figure out. Emma nodded slowly. She looked down at the photograph in her lap. I'm glad you came back, she said. I never left. I just couldn't find you. I pulled out of the visitor lot. In my rearview mirror, I watched Derek finally move, walking toward his Accord like a man who'd forgotten how his legs worked. Marcus Webb followed him, folder in hand, documents that would begin the process of institutional justice. The school receded behind us. The suburban streets of Plano gave way to the highway, then to the smaller roads that led toward Garland and the ice cream shop with the purple cow that Doris had loved. Emma talked the whole way about school, About her teacher, Miss Patterson. About the book she was reading and the spelling test she'd aced, and the friend named Maya who had a dog named Biscuit. 3 years of life I'd missed, condensed into a 15-minute car ride. Tyler was quieter, listening to his sister, occasionally looking at me in the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't quite read. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Pastor Decker sat in the back seat with his hand on Tyler's shoulder, offering the kind of silent presence that 50 years of ministry had taught him. I drove and listened and felt the brass of my belt buckle against my palm when I shifted gears. The leather Doris had ordered from San Antonio. "So you remember who you are." I knew who I was, a man who fixed things, a man who'd lost everything and found a way to get some of it back, a man driving his grandchildren to get ice cream while their father faced the consequences of a 3-year lie. The purple cow appeared on the right side of the road. The ice cream shop looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago when Doris was alive and Kristen was present and the world made sense. I parked and helped the kids out of the van. "Purple ice cream," Emma announced, "with sprinkles." "Can I have chocolate?" Tyler asked. "You can have whatever you want," I said. We walked into the shop together, my grandchildren, my pastor, and me. The girl behind the counter smiled at us, like we were just another family on a Tuesday afternoon. For the first time in 3 years, that's exactly what we were. 72 hours after Derek crumbled in the Ridgeview Elementary parking lot, Marcus Webb knocked on the door of Unit 1847 at the towers at Stonebriar. I wasn't there. I learned the details later from Webb himself, over coffee at the same diner where I'd first met Margaret Chen. But I can picture it well enough. The way Kristen must have looked when she answered the door in her Lululemon athleisure, skin still tan from her latest trip to Cancun, expecting maybe a delivery driver or a neighbor asking to borrow something. Instead, she got Marcus Webb in his rumpled suit, holding a folder of documents thick enough to end her life as she'd known it. "Kristen Wescott Farrell?" Webb asked. "It's just Wescott now." She leaned against the doorframe. "Can I help you?" "I'm Marcus Webb, Special Investigations Unit, American Family Insurance." He handed her the folder. "You've been served." Webb told me later that her face went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that might have been fear, though Kristen had spent 3 years convincing herself she was untouchable. So maybe it was just disbelief. "There must be some mistake," she said. "No mistake, ma'am. We're pursuing recovery of the $250,000 death benefit paid to your husband, Derek Farrell, in March 2022, plus investigative costs and penalties as allowed under Texas law." Kristen's hand tightened on the doorframe. Behind her, the condo stretched out in its Instagram-ready minimalist white gold accents catching the morning light. The same condo she'd been paying for with money extracted from my second mortgage. "I don't understand," she said. Webb's voice stayed flat. "Professional. The claim was filed fraudulently. You're alive, Mrs. Wescott. Have been this whole time. You have documentation." She started to close the door. Webb put his hand against it. "Your attorney will want to review those documents immediately. Cooperation may reduce civil penalties. Obstruction will not." He left her standing in the doorway of her luxury condo, holding papers that documented 3 years of lies in black and white. 1 week after the confrontation, the Collin County District Attorney filed criminal charges. Insurance fraud under Texas Penal Code, Section 35-2, third-degree felony, 2 to 10 years in state prison. The charges named both Derek Farrell and Kristen Marie Wescott Farrell as co-conspirators. Derek received his indictment at the Plano apartment. He called the prosecutor's office within 24 hours, offering full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. That was Derek. always looking for the easy way out. He gave them everything. Bank statements showing the Joint Capital One savings account with $34,000 accumulated from my payments and skimmed insurance money. Credit card records documenting resort vacations, designer handbags, theme park tickets. A detailed timeline of how the scheme developed, confirming what I'd suspected. Kristen conceived the plan during their Cancun vacation 6 months before her staged death. They'd been sitting on a beach, drinking margaritas I probably paid for, when my daughter decided to erase herself from existence and bleed me dry in the process. Derek's testimony established the mechanics. Kristen had researched death fraud cases for months, taking notes on true crime podcasts, studying how other fraudsters got caught. She'd identified Mexico as the ideal location because cremation regulations were different, because American insurance companies struggled to verify foreign death claims, because the distance made investigation difficult. The fake car accident was her design. The cremation story was her invention. The monthly payment requests were scripted, with suggested amounts and emotional talking points she'd written out for Derek to follow. She said no one would get hurt, Derek told the prosecutors. She said her parents were old anyway, that they'd probably die in a few years regardless, and at least this way we'd have financial security. Old anyway. My wife had been 61. I was 54. Old anyway. Kristen refused to cooperate when investigators questioned her. She sat in the interview room at the Collin County Sheriff's Office with her attorney beside her, arms crossed, face arranged in an expression of wounded innocence. "This is so unfair," she said. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed." Her attorney, a young man named Patterson who'd never handled a case like this, leaned over and whispered something. Kristen shook her head. "I'm the victim here," she continued. "Derek manipulated me. He convinced me my parents didn't care about me, that they'd never supported my dreams. I was in a dark place. He took advantage." The investigator slid a printout across the table. Kristen's handwritten notes from her true crime research, recovered from her condo during a court-authorized search. Bullet points about successful fraud cases. Warnings about common mistakes. A timeline she'd drafted of the fake death plan dated 4 months before the accident. "These are your notes, Miss Wescott. Your handwriting. Planning document dated October 2021. Kristen stared at the paper. Her face didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "I was just researching for a novel. I wanted to write a book. A book. Yes, fiction. I was going to be a writer." Her attorney requested a recess. In the hallway, according to sources Margaret Chen developed later, Patterson explained that the evidence was overwhelming. The visitor logs, the Instagram photos, the USPS signature, the voicemails with airport audio, her own handwritten planning notes. Cooperation might reduce her sentence. Continued denial would guarantee the maximum. Kristen fired him the next day and hired a more expensive attorney who told her the same thing. The financial consequences cascaded faster than I'd expected. The insurance company placed liens on all assets belonging to both Derek and Kristen within 2 weeks of the criminal charges. The court froze the $34,000 joint savings account. 3 years of extracted money, inaccessible to either of them. Kristen's luxury condo became forfeit when she couldn't make the mortgage payments. Without the fraud income, without access to the frozen accounts, she had nothing. The same woman who'd posted about the universe providing found herself facing eviction from the life she'd built on lies. Derek's Plano apartment lease terminated when the property management company learned about his wage garnishment and pending charges. He moved in with his brother in Arlington, sleeping on a couch while awaiting trial. Comfort Air Systems fired Derek within a week of the charges becoming public. The company's HR director called my shop to apologize, as if I needed apologies from strangers. "We had no idea," she said. "He seemed like a nice guy." Nice guys don't help fake their wives' deaths and steal from their fathers-in-law for 3 years. But I didn't say that. I just thanked her for calling and went back to servicing a heat pump in Rowlett. Word spread through the DFW HVAC industry faster than I'd anticipated. Within a month, Derek was unemployable in the trade. No company would hire someone who'd defrauded the Wescott family name. 32 years of honest work had built something worth protecting, and the industry protected it. The investigators found Kristen's true crime podcast notes during the evidence review. Detailed annotations on episodes about Elizabeth Holmes and Anna Delvey. Margin notes analyzing how each fraudster got caught, what mistakes they made, how she would avoid those pitfalls. The notes became prosecution exhibits, demonstrating premeditation and conscious planning. She hadn't stumbled into fraud through desperation or circumstances. She'd studied it like a curriculum, then executed her plan with deliberate calculation. Margaret Chen filed my civil fraud recovery suit in Collin County the same week the criminal charges were announced. She pursued treble damages under Texas law, the full $87,000 I documented in my green ledger, plus the $45,000 surgery loan, plus attorney fees and investigative costs. More importantly, she petitioned for emergency grandparent visitation rights under Texas Family Code, Section 53433.33. E333. The petition cited criminal charges against both parents, documented evidence that the children had been told lies about their grandfather, and the urgent need for stable family contact during a period of upheaval. Judge Patricia Morales reviewed the evidence in her chambers. The green ledger with its careful records, the Instagram screenshots showing the children on vacations funded by my sacrifice, the voicemails with airport backgrounds, the visitor logs, the USPS signature capture, with both parents facing prosecution and documented evidence they'd lied to the children about their grandfather. Judge Morales granted me supervised visitation that afternoon, with full custody review pending criminal proceedings. Emma and Tyler went into temporary foster care. Standard procedure when both parents face criminal charges and no suitable family placement exists. The foster home was in Plano, a 3-bedroom house with a swing set in the backyard and a foster mother named Juanita Reyes who'd been caring for children for 22 years. I visited every day. The court-appointed supervisor sat in the kitchen while I spent time with my grandchildren in the living room. Her presence a formality that faded into the background as the visits continued. The first visit, Emma ran to me the way she had in the school parking lot, arms wrapping around my waist before I'd cleared the doorway. Tyler hung back, still uncertain, still processing everything that had happened to his family in the span of 2 weeks. Grandpa Lloyd. Emma pressed her face against my shirt. I knew you'd come. I told you I would. Every day. She pulled me to the couch and sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. From her backpack, she produced a folder stuffed with papers. I saved these, she said. All of them. Photos, drawings, notes she'd written to herself about Grandpa Lloyd, who Mommy said didn't want to see them anymore. A photo of me holding her at the zoo, both of us squinting into the sun. Another of Doris's purple birthday cake, the frosting she'd made from scratch. A crayon picture of a man standing next to a truck with Wescott Comfort Solutions, copied in 8-year-old handwriting. I knew she was wrong, Emma said. I didn't know how, but I knew. Tyler edged closer during that first visit. By the third day, he was sitting on my other side, showing me how he took apart his toys to understand how they worked. A flashlight he'd disassembled and reassembled. A broken clock he'd salvaged from the foster home's junk drawer. Miss Juanita said you fix things, Tyler said. That's right. For a long time now. Can you teach me? I'd like that. I brought him a simple thermostat the next visit. An old Honeywell from my collection. Nothing fancy. Just a bimetallic coil and a mercury switch. I showed him how the coil expanded when it warmed and contracted when it cooled, how that movement made the switch tip one way or the other. No computers, he asked. No computers. Just metal that knows what temperature it is. He turned the thermostat over in his hands, studying the mechanism with the same intensity I'd seen in my own reflection 40 years ago. The community judgment at First Baptist Church was swift. Pastor Jim Decker addressed the congregation on the Sunday after the charges became public. He stood before the same altar where he'd blessed Kristen's empty urn, and he told them the truth. 3 years ago, he said, I led this congregation in mourning, a woman who was alive. I blessed an urn that held nothing. I comforted a father who was being robbed by the daughter he thought was dead. The silence in the sanctuary was total. Kristen Wescott Farrell is no longer a member of this church. Her name has been removed from our prayer rolls. This congregation will continue to support Lloyd Wescott, who has been a faithful member for 50 years, and his grandchildren, who are innocent of their parents' sins. Kristen's Frisco neighbors reacted with the particular coldness of people who'd been fooled. The same women who'd commented on her Instagram posts about living her best life now unfollowed and avoided eye contact in the building elevators. The concierge who'd signed for her packages stopped making small talk. The fitness instructor who'd taught her Pilates class found scheduling conflicts whenever Kristen tried to book. She had no real allies, just acquaintances who'd wanted proximity to perceived success and who wanted nothing to do with documented failure. 4 months after the charges were filed, Derek accepted his plea deal in August. Guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Kristen. 3 years probation. Mandatory restitution of $147,000 to the insurance company and $27,000 to me, payments deducted from whatever wages he could earn in whatever job would hire him. He stood before Judge Morales in a suit that didn't fit quite right anymore, weight he'd lost during the stress of prosecution hanging loose around his frame. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he looked at the gallery where I sat with Pastor Decker. I'm sorry, Derek said. I should have stopped it. I should have told the truth. The judge accepted his plea and scheduled his probation terms. Derek walked out of the courthouse, a convicted felon, his sales career over, his marriage ending, his life reduced to whatever he could rebuild from the wreckage of his choices. Kristen went to trial in October. She'd fired 3 attorneys by then, each one telling her the same thing: cooperate, accept responsibility, minimize the damage. She refused. The victim narrative had become her only defense, and she clung to it like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution presented visitor logs, Instagram posts, voicemails, USPS records, bank statements, credit card receipts, and Kristen's own handwritten planning notes. Derek testified against her, explaining the scheme in detail, confirming her role as architect and primary beneficiary. The defense argued manipulation, coercion, mental health struggles. Kristen took the stand and repeated her claim that Derek had controlled everything, that she'd been a victim of his manipulation, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone. The prosecutor asked her a single question on cross-examination. Miss Wescott, did your mother know you were alive when she died of a stroke 8 months after your staged death? Kristen's composure cracked for the first time in 6 days. I didn't. I couldn't have known that would happen. That wasn't my question. Did your mother die believing you were dead? Yes. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. I sat in the gallery with Pastor Decker beside me, the same position I'd occupied throughout the trial. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The bailiff's shoes squeaked on the polished floor as he shifted his weight. The courtroom had become familiar, the way hospital rooms become familiar during long illnesses. I touched my belt buckle, the brass Doris chose 20 years ago. the leather that had molded to my waist through everything. Judge Morales addressed Kristen before announcing the sentence. Sex. Ms. Wescott, you've shown no remorse throughout these proceedings. You've blamed your husband, your parents, your circumstances. You've never once acknowledged the harm you caused, particularly to your father, who mortgaged his home to support grandchildren he thought were orphaned, and to your mother, who died believing her only daughter preceded her. Kristen stood at the defense table, her latest attorney beside her. She was thinner than she'd been in the Instagram photos. The tan faded, the designer clothes replaced by a conservative suit her lawyer had probably chosen. This court sentences you to 18 months in state prison, Judge Morales said. Upon release, you will complete 3 years of supervised probation and pay full restitution as ordered. Kristen's face didn't change. Whatever she felt, she kept hidden behind the same mask she'd worn for 3 years of fraud. Before I conclude, the judge said, does Mr. Wescott wish to make a statement? I stood. The gallery's attention shifted to me. Kristen turned, and for the first time since the trial began, she met my eyes. I looked at my daughter. The girl I'd held in the delivery room at 3:47 a.m. The child I'd worked double shifts to provide for. The woman who'd let her mother die of grief for a living person. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The evidence had spoken for 36 months of lies. The law had spoken for justice. The community had spoken through their judgment. I sat down. Judge Morales concluded the proceedings. Officers approached Kristen to escort her from the courtroom. As they let her past the gallery, she paused beside my row. "Dad," she said. I looked at her. My hands rested on my knees, steady the way they'd always been. She opened her mouth to say something more. Nothing came out. The officers guided her forward, through the side door, into the system that would hold her for the next 18 months. Pastor Decker put his hand on my shoulder. "It's done," he said. I touched my belt buckle. "Not yet," I said. "The kids still need a home." We left the courthouse together. Outside, the October sun was warm, Texas clinging to summer the way it always did. My service van sat in the parking lot with its magnetic signs, advertising 32 years of honest work. I had a custody hearing scheduled for next week. Margaret Chen had prepared the paperwork. The foster care placement had been temporary, a bridge between criminal proceedings and permanent arrangements. Emma and Tyler needed stability. They needed someone who would show up every day and keep his promises. They needed family. I drove to the foster home for my afternoon visit. Emma met me at the door with a new drawing, the sun yellow in one corner, stick figures holding hands in the middle. "That's us," she said. "You, me, and Tyler, at your house." "My house," I said. Mrs. Margaret said, "Maybe we can live there, with you, if the judge says yes." I looked at the drawing. The house she'd drawn had a workshop in the garage. She'd remembered that detail from visits 3 years ago. The judge might say yes, I told her. Tyler appeared behind his sister, holding the thermostat I'd given him. "I figured out how the coil works," he said. "Want to see?" I followed my grandchildren into the foster home, leaving the courthouse and the sentence and my silent daughter behind. There would be paperwork and hearings and months of rebuilding ahead. There would be therapy for the children and supervision requirements, and a learning curve steeper than any I'd faced before. But the lies were over. The extraction had stopped. The grave I'd visited every Sunday for 3 years was being removed from Restland Memorial Park, the headstone that commemorated a living woman acknowledged at last as the fraud it had always been. Doris's grave remained. I'd visit her tomorrow, the way I visited every Sunday. I'd tell her about the trial, about the sentencing, about Emma's drawing and Tyler's thermostat and the custody hearing next week. She wouldn't answer. The dead never do, but some part of her would know. Some part of her had always known that something was wrong with our daughter, had always worried about the choices Kristen made and the values she didn't share. Maybe I should have listened. Maybe I should have seen it sooner. But I saw it now, and I was still standing, still working, still showing up. That's what Lloyd does. Loving this so far? Smash like and rate my story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Thank you for being here. 14 months after Kristen's sentencing, I sat in my garage workshop with Emma beside me at the workbench. The 60 vintage thermostats on the pegboard caught the late afternoon light through the windows, brass housings warm against the fading sun. Emma, 9 years old now, leaned over the 1967 Honeywell Round I'd placed in front of her. Her honey blonde hair fell across her face as she studied the mechanism, the same hair her mother had, though Emma's eyes held something her mother's eyes never held. Patience, curiosity without calculation. Tyler watched from his stool 3 feet away, waiting his turn without complaint, the way Doris used to wait. 7 years old, with my mechanical interest showing through in everything he touched. He'd already taken apart the flashlight I'd given him last week and reassembled it perfectly. The boy understood how things fit together. Hold the magnifying glass steady, I told Emma. See where the coil connects to the switch. She adjusted her grip. The silver part? That's it. Mercury contacts. When the coil expands from heat, it tips the switch one direction. When it cools and contracts, tips it the other way. And that turns the heater on and off. Exactly right. The foreclosure notice was long gone. Margaret Chen, my attorney, had filed the fraud recovery suit and won. The insurance company's restitution settlement covered the rest. The debt that had threatened to take this house, the same house where I'd raised Kristen and buried Doris's memory in every room, had been eliminated. I had full custody of both grandchildren now. The judge had asked Emma and Tyler during the custody hearing where they wanted to live. Emma had produced that worn photograph from her sock drawer, the one of me holding her at her 4th birthday party, and said, "With Grandpa Lloyd." He never stopped wanting us. Tyler had nodded. He teaches me how things work. The court agreed unanimously. Inside the house, Doris's old sewing room had been transformed over the past year. New curtains Emma had picked out, a child-sized sewing machine beside my wife's old Singer, and bins of fabric organized by color. Emma was learning to quilt from Doris's patterns, her grandmother's handwritten instructions still legible in the margins of each template. Emma's first finished quilt hung on her bedroom wall. Purple and white squares, uneven stitching, corners that didn't quite match. She'd made it herself, following notes from a woman she'd never meet. "Can I try the dental pick now?" Emma asked. I handed her the small tool. Gentle pressure. You're cleaning the contacts, not scraping them. She worked with careful attention, tongue between her teeth, the way Doris used to concentrate. Tyler leaned forward on his stool, watching his sister's technique. Every Sunday after church, I drove to Restland Memorial Park. Doris's grave remained where it had always been, the granite marker weathered now, the inscription unchanged. Beloved wife and mother. I placed yellow roses on her plot, the same ones she'd carried at our wedding. The empty headstone beside her was gone. The memorial for Kristen had been removed 3 months after the trial. The ground leveled, the grass already growing back, unmarked, anonymous. There was no marker for a living woman serving 18 months in state prison, just honest earth where lies used to stand. I didn't visit that empty space anymore. Didn't need to. You know what I like about these old thermostats? I asked Emma. She looked up from her work, magnifying glass still in hand. No deception, I said. Just a coil of metal that knows when it's cold. Emma nodded. Not the nod of a child humoring an adult, but the nod of someone who understood. She knew more about lies and truth than a 9-year-old should. She'd lived through the discovery that her mother had faked her death, that her father had helped steal from her grandfather, that the family she'd trusted had been built on fraud. She'd also learned that some people keep their promises, that some people show up every day, that honest work and honest love can rebuild what deception destroys. Tyler slid off his stool and moved closer. "When's my turn?" "Soon," I said. "Let your sister finish the contacts first." Emma returned to her work, dental pick moving with growing confidence. The afternoon light shifted through the garage windows, casting long shadows across the pegboard and its collection of restored thermostats. 40 years of mechanical history, simple devices that told the truth about temperature, that responded to the world exactly as they were designed to. I touched my belt buckle. The brass was warm under my fingers, heated by the afternoon sun, the leather molded to my waist through everything that had happened since, through Kristen's fake death and Doris's real one, through 3 years of lies and 14 months of rebuilding, through foreclosure threats and custody hearings and a trial where I'd said nothing to the daughter I no longer recognized. I finally had peace. Not the peace of revenge, not the satisfaction of watching someone punished. This was different, the peace that honest work earns. Of family restored, of a lie replaced with something real. Emma set down the dental pick and held up the thermostat. Oh, did I do it right? I took the device and examined her work. The mercury contacts gleamed. The coil sat properly in its housing. "Perfect," I said. "Now let's see if it still works." Tyler grabbed his stool and dragged it closer, ready to watch. Emma leaned in beside me, her shoulder touching mine, the way it had that first day in the school parking lot, when she'd run across the pickup lane with a photograph clutched against her chest. I connected the thermostat to the test rig I'd built 30 years ago. The switch clicked. The indicator light glowed. "It works," Emma said, "because you did it right." The garage settled around us. Old wood, familiar sounds, the smell of machine oil and brass polish. 3 people at a workbench, learning and teaching, building something built on truth instead of lies. Something true,